Today we are going to talk about the former retail store known as Montgomery Ward. I know I say this a lot, but this time it's very much true, as this company has a ton of history going all the way back to the 1800s. So I'll try to hit all the key points to keep this video fairly short. Montgomery Ward was a retail giant back in the day, and at their peak, they would have over 500 locations. So if you're not familiar with this retailer, well, they were pretty similar to Sears. In fact, for the majority of their existence, Sears would be their main competitor. They sold everything from clothes to shoes to electronics and appliances, and in later years they even had auto centers. So it's safe to say Montgomery Ward's was a true one-stop department store. I've read many articles online about people claiming to still be using their appliances to this day, so yeah, I think their stuff was pretty good quality. Anyway, they survived many hardships throughout their years, but they would ultimately fold in the early 2000s. As I mentioned before, they had hundreds of retail locations throughout the United States, but they didn't exactly start out that way. In fact, they started out exclusively as a mail-order catalog company back in 1872. That was the year Aaron Montgomery Ward founded the company. Ward was a traveling salesman who saw the need for a mail-order business as his main demographic was rural America. Basically, it was set up for people who just lived too far from town to make it practical to visit a local store. In 1883, the catalog had grown to 230 pages and featured nearly 1,000 items. The catalog was known as the Wish Book. 13 years later, in 1896, Sears would join the party by creating their own Wish Book, and this would mark the beginning of their rivalry. In 1904, the Montgomery Ward catalog would be distributed to 3 million households. That's a pretty nice accomplishment for that time. Their catalog business was successful by building a network of warehouses. They were located in Baltimore, Fort Worth, Kansas City, Oakland, and St. Paul. Anyways, Ward would die in 1913, leaving the control of the company to his family, and 6 years later, they would take it public in 1919. So a major step for the company was in 1926. They would open their first retail location in Plymouth, Indiana. This seems odd to say now, but that decision was made in part by the growing popularity of the automobile, as more and more families were willing to drive to retail stores, and they were less likely to order through the mail. This first store was a major success, and Ward's was looking to expand. But if you're up to date on American history, you would know the mid to late 20s was a rough time economically, as it was the dawn of the Great Depression. Ward's would make a good decision, and they would just hold serve for a few years. They would save their money in fear that expansion would bankrupt the company. However, a few years later they would expand, and they would expand in a big way. In 1928, they would open 243 locations. And by the end of 1930, ready for this one? They would have a whopping 531 retail stores. There's no doubt that their rapid expansion was due to the fact that many of their competitors simply just didn't survive the Depression, and Ward's now had a larger stake in the marketplace. Anyways, by 1931, Ward solidified their spot as America's #1 retailer, bringing in nearly $300 million in sales annually. So, an interesting fact here, in 1939, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was written by a member of the Montgomery Ward marketing team. Pretty cool, I had no idea until I started this research. A copy of Rudolph would be handed out to children when they came into the store to visit Santa. Over the years, they would distribute over 6 million copies. Anyways, during World War II, Ward's would once again halt their expansion in fear of an upcoming recession. And immediately following the war in 1944, there was some tension between the CEO of Ward's and the labor unions. I had read an article where Eisenhower actually sent the National Guard to the headquarters. It seems like there's a lot to it, and if you want to hear more, I could always make a video about that. Anyways, throughout the 50s and 60s, Ward's would start to lose ground to their competitors, and specifically Sears. As the American shopping mall was starting to become a thing, Sears was taking advantage of it. Sears was anchoring malls all across the country, something Ward's was extremely hesitant to do. Years later, they would start to lease mall locations, but they were way behind and playing catch up. In 1973, Montgomery Ward's would purchase a much smaller retailer called Jefferson Stores, Inc. These new stores would be rebranded as Jefferson Ward. These locations were fairly similar to their existing locations. However, they would be a little more modern and they would cater to a younger demographic. In 1974, the gas and oil giant Mobil would purchase Montgomery Ward's. So throughout the rest of the 1970s, the Jefferson Ward concept was easily outperforming their other locations. And with that data, Mobil decided to dive headfirst and start converting more and more stores into the Jefferson Ward layout. This really did seem like a good idea, but it wasn't executed very well. Basically, they would send Jefferson Ward employees to the other locations to assist in the remodel, and they would also help train employees. To start with, sending employees from one store to another would leave some locations short-handed. Not only that, stores were set up different, and employees were trained differently. So this whole project never really took off. In fact, the company would just start to lose money. So by 1985, they were looking to recoup some of the money that they had spent, and they would sell 18 of their underperforming locations to Bradley's. Also in 1985, they would retire their mail order catalog. So by making these few adjustments, they would be back to making a profit, and they would spend the money wisely, as they would greatly expand their electronics department, calling it Electronic Avenue. During this time, they would focus on the home computer, as that would become one of their hottest sellers. In 1988, Montgomery Ward's would be sold to GE for a reported $3.8 billion. Under the ownership of GE, they would continue to focus heavily on electronics. Along with that, appliances were one of their top moneymakers. By the way, at this time, there were 500 locations. However, many of these were older and very much in need of updating. So with that being said, going into the 1990s, Ward's was starting to struggle, and they were starting to lose a grip on their competition. During this time, everyone was competing for the retail market share. Companies such as Sears, Ames, Kmart, Target, and Walmart. So they would actually bring back their mail order catalog, but this time it wouldn't be very successful. In fact, it would start to lose the company money. So with all these factors, in 1997, they would file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection, and they had hopes of restructuring the company. Initially, there weren't any plans to close any stores, but after a few years of struggling sales, it became clear that was the only way to be profitable. So 2 years later, in 1999, they would close nearly 50% of their overall stores. The remaining locations would undergo a major overhaul. These stores were remodeled and modernized. This would cost GE millions of dollars. With the new look stores came a new name. The company was now known as just Ward's. All this seemed like a good idea, but this new store concept never really got off the ground. And by the year 2000, Ward's was once again losing money. So with that, on December 28, 2000, Ward's filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, and they began liquidation of the remaining 250 locations. At the time, it was the biggest retail bankruptcy in United States history. So it's been a long time since they went out of business, but you know the drill. If you do know of a location that's still left abandoned, let me know about that in the comments because I'd love to check them out. Oh, and by the way, the Ward's name was purchased in 2004, and they do have an active website. So if you want to check it out, just look at wards.com. Anyway guys, that's all I have for today's video. Thank you so much. I appreciate you all. And if you do have a suggestion for a future video, let me know about that in the comments. If you don't mind, share this video, hit the thumbs up, and I will see you all next time.